Welcome, everyone, to the Harmonic Convergence 2020. We're on day 3, and the first 2 days have been very eventful. 30 seconds. And then you guys, you'll do that. Great. Okay. Good morning, everyone, to the Harmonic Convergence 2020, day 3. The first 2 days have been eventful, informative, and the feedback we've gotten from everyone is that it's going really well, and we're sharing some information that many of you aren't aware of, introducing you to some amazing people that very few people have met and heard their stories. And so we're going to continue to impress you and to share with you the stories of people from around the world that have great wisdom and important information to share with you and the rest of our human family. So today our topic, our theme is the leadership of love. And central to this theme that I want to convey is the concept, or the importance rather, of how important it is to lead every action from a place of love. That is so central and key to bring about a life that exudes happiness and joy and peace from within and peace without, or from the outside. And so this is our theme for the day, and we're going to start our meditation, 22 minutes. So again, if you could find yourself in a comfortable position, you can do this seated like myself, or in a chair with your feet on the ground, or you could lay down. Whatever feels comfortable to you. Doesn't matter. But if you are seated, try to sit straight. Make your spine as straight as possible. And relax your shoulders. Let your shoulders drop down and your shoulder blades drop down on your back. So try to feel into that so that you're not tension. You know, so much of our day is in a rush. We're off to do the next thing, and over time we are developing tension in our body, and we're not conscious of this tension. And so it's a good time before we meditate to take stock in the tension that we may be feeling. So let's get comfortable. You know, close your eyes, kind of feel, especially in the shoulders and in the neck, where there might be a little tension, and then relax those muscles. Really think about it and let your shoulders drop. Raise your neck a little bit. Just kind of stretch your neck up. Make your spine as straight as possible. Stack your 33 vertebrae and feel your seatedness into the earth. Okay, let's just take a moment and feel our body. And as we do that, we're going to breathe in, slow breaths in through our nose, and we're going to exhale through our mouth. Okay, let's do 3 of those. And as we do them, let's feel into our chest, into our back, into all the places in our body where there may be some stress or discomfort, and make minute adjustments to relax those areas, however that is right for you. You know, this seated position, if that's not comfortable for you, don't be uncomfortable. The main thing is to be comfortable. So just find a comfortable position. Now, as we breathe in and breathe out, let's think about this idea. How important air is in our lives. You know, we can go days without water, weeks and months without food, but how long would we last without air? Think about that. And as we relax and breathe and get ready for this 22-minute meditation, let's imagine that air is conscious, like a spirit. And if we can imagine that, let's just take a moment and give our gratitude to air, because it fills our lungs full of life-giving energy that is absorbed by our body through the lungs into the bloodstream, and that oxygen is distributed to all the cells in our body. And our cells, the little machines that collectively and collaboratively allow us to have a physical experience. Think about that. These little guys that we hardly think about, and there's trillions of them in your body, are doing work for you. They're doing real work. There's no denying it. Any biologist will tell you there's a lot of work going on at the molecular level, and these little guys are orchestrating a dance and a symphony in each cell that's so incredibly complex just to be there for you. Let's give those little guys some love. Okay? So let's thank the air, and let's thank our cells, and within the body of the cell of our body, each cell, trillions of them, you've got little guys running around like DNA synthase and messenger RNA and ribosomes and liposomes and all sorts of stuff in there that's working feverishly to make it possible for you to have a physical experience. Let's give them some love. Let's acknowledge them. And I would like to suggest that when you do that, they feel that energy of love, and they will respond. I'm getting chills right now, just right now, thinking about it. So this meditation, the leadership of love, and you are a leader for your own body, let's dedicate this to all the cells that make you, you, and all the molecules in those cells that do their thing. Okay? Let's begin now. 3 cleansing breaths. Let's breathe out through the mouth and in through the nose. Okay, let's exhale all the way to the bottom. And now, I want you on this 3rd inhale to hold the oxygen in your lungs so that you feel the pressure. That pressure that grows when we hold our breath, and that feeling of wanting to exhale. Let's hold it for a 4 count, and I'll take you through it. And imagine as that pressure builds, what you're actually doing is building up love in your heart chakra. That's the feeling we want, okay? So breathe in through the nose. Hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4, and let go. Okay, so we're going to continue doing this and singing the note Hu, the sound of the universe. In many cultures around the world, they believe this is the sound of creation. So we're going to give thanks to that creation, and however it was generated, whoever or whatever is responsible, and we don't know for sure, but let's just be grateful to how incredibly beautiful the universe and our world is, and what a miracle our life is. Just doesn't matter what religious or philosophical background you have adopted and practice. Even if you're an atheist, at least you can be grateful to the miracle that is life. Let's be grateful, okay? Okay, let's begin. Okay. Now we're going to take a few moments for silent contemplation. And again, remember that we're thinking about love and the leadership of love that guides us. Embodying love as we lead our lives and be role models for those that we come into contact with every day.
We ran out of time.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Harmonic Convergence 2020, Day 3. Today, our theme is the leadership of love, what guides your every action. And we had our special segment yesterday, Patrick and I, when we decided to join you all for a little impromptu behind-the-scenes segment. And you all loved it so much, and it was so helpful that we decided to keep sharing this journey with you every single day. And today, we brought in Mark as well so that we can all be here together, because this is basically what's going on. We're all in this together. So welcome. Thanks for tuning in. We have an amazing day, incredible content lined up for you today, building on everything we worked on yesterday. So we started off our journey with working on inner peace and really addressing how inner peace is the first step to world peace. And then we moved yesterday into facing the shadow and looking all the difficult elements and how our fears and our vulnerabilities can create and generate and nurture courage within us. So today we're moving into love. So with that said, Patrick.
Yes.
What are your, how do you feel like you can lead better from a place of love? Just putting you in the hot seat right now, right on the spot, right here.
Here we are. This is bringing me back to when we were originally coming up with the theme for the day. And originally the day was themed like the dimensions of love and all the different ways that love shows up in our lives and in the world. And as we started brainstorming on what to like really brand the day and how to, and also the tagline, which is what fuels every action, we decided to like turn love into a force that we could tap into on a momentary basis and choose in every moment, like how is love guiding my words right now? How is love seeing through my eyes? How am I receiving through my senses with the feeling of love? Not just like projecting love, but also receiving love through all my senses, through my thoughts, through my consciousness, and how I'm feeling. Is every footstep, every handshake, every letter I write, every word I say fueled with love, or is it not? And to be honest with you, I'm maybe 5%, maybe a little bit less, a little bit more, am I really conscious of every action and every thought and every word that I say? And so our invitation for ourselves and for the world is every action and thought fueled with love? And so
it's a good question, and it's a tall order.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things that kind of turned me off about the things like the New Age movement as an atheist was the foo-foo, you know, warm, fuzzy sugarcoating of life when things are obviously so challenging for us. And I just felt it was not a realistic way to live a life of, you know, coming from a place of love, because we get angry, we get depressed, we get frustrated, we become sad. And in those moments, you know, how can you, those are obviously not feelings of love, at least not at first blush. And as a spiritual scientist over the last few years, I've really dove deeply into these questions about our emotions, the source of them, and what ultimately leads into a life in which we're happy, joyful, and energized, because that's a life I want to live. And I think most people want to live a happy life. And you know, it's in the Constitution or in the the Declaration of Independence. It's implied, and in one of those two documents, I'm sorry, I forget which one it is. That it states that this is a nation of people that have the right to happiness. Right. And so, where does sadness and frustration and anger play in something like that? And what I realized is that it's okay to have those emotions. They're important. We have to honor them and, you know, vent them, but never let them stay for us for long. Always return to that place of love. We are in control of our thoughts.
Right.
And if we allow ourselves to just focus on something that's bringing us down and don't bring ourselves out of it through the power of thought, then that's a level, you know, that we will exist at. We'll just marinate in that negative energy, and it sucks us. It's a form of drain. But love is such a invigorating force. The source of it is infinite in my experience, especially when I'm around other people that I love, who are happy, who bring joy in my life. And so I've learned to be very astute to the energies that come into my immediate surroundings, the people that bring their own energy and how that affects me. And you know, over the last few years, I've experimented with that, and I've created my own personal constitution to honor the things that keep me happy and still honor these emotions that we don't dissociate with love, because we're human beings. We're imperfect. People that we love are imperfect. They affect us negatively, but it's important to establish boundaries and only allow that energy, that negative energy, to come into our field so long, because it's like a vampire if we allow it. So
definitely.
So
yeah,
what do you
definitely.
think about that?
I love that. I love that, because I keep hearing this very same message from a lot of different spiritual teachers around, and we talked about this yesterday, if you do feel sad, if you do feel upset or triggered or angry, or something does come up, which it will inevitably, we're human, it's going to happen. It's not going to be perfect all the time. It's how long are you going to stay there?
Right.
And how fast can you come out of it? And how soon can you let it go?
Right.
And that really is the test of growth and evolution. And true happiness is not to avoid it and live this perfect, you know, fantasy.
Right.
But about, okay, when that happens, what do you do with it? What do you do about it? And how soon do you bounce back?
Yeah, that's, I think, a skill that we develop. It's like any skill that takes time and effort.
Yeah.
But the key to it is to make that effort, to be conscious and aware of the effects of these negative draining energies that can deplete us and put us in such a low state that it's hard to, you know, dig out of.
Yeah.
But by surrounding yourself by people who you know have your best interest and bring joy to your life, or animals, you know, pets. That's why we have pets, frankly, because we don't want a pet that's a, you know, a negative energy entity,
That would
right?
not be fun.
That drains us. We get pets because they bring such joy into our lives. And my favorite animal as a pet is the dog. And I find it amazing that it is God in reverse. You know, I don't know if that's a coincidence or not, and I no longer believe in coincidences. But to me, the dog is such an incredible teacher of unconditional love. And you feel it as soon as a dog comes to you, its tail's wagging and its furry body is rubbing up against you and it wants to kiss you. And it's so obvious that this animal, this living creature, is a teacher of unconditional love, and they affect us and bring us to so much joy. And that is an example of the kind of thing we're talking about in leadership of love, that dogs are great teachers, and in my mind, a leader of unconditional love.
The leadership of dogs.
Right.
Yeah, the other reason why we were discussing this topic is thinking about leadership and the kind of leadership that we have in our world, and the kind of leadership that we have in this particular country, and what is motivating that leadership. What are the motivating forces of the leadership that is all around us, and how we go from where we are in this, the kind of leadership that we see around us, which is very short-sighted, it's very self-serving, it's very, it can be greedy, not taking the big picture into account, not taking the long term into account. And how do we shift that into taking the next 7 generations into account and doing that from a place of love in the bigger the bigger system of leadership that we're existing within? And that was where we discussed this topic of the leadership of love and putting the word leadership with the word love and combining how leadership and love go together.
Right. And on the topic of leadership of love, you know, and you brought up, you know, our U.S. leader, that it's very clear to many of us, and I think to most of us, that this is a man who lacked love in his life at a young age, and we're seeing that expressed.
Right.
And his father was a businessman who probably, according to my limited understanding, was very busy building his empire.
Yeah.
And when you're doing that, and I know from being a businessman myself how easy it is to become consumed in the business and not giving time and love to the family, and especially young children at a critical stage of their development.
True.
If they don't have that, they begin to see their father, especially a young man, will see a father who's a very successful businessman, who's adored by, you know, everyone, because, you know, we associate success with business success, you know, and so it's easy to look up to that person as a role model, but that person isn't really giving the love and the parenting to the child. And so their expression, or rather their example of love, is this man who doesn't give any love to the family, and that they see that as a role model to follow, and to them the love is expressed through business success. And so, and of course this is self-evidently wrong. It's just,
no.
Right?
Not
so this
the
is
right
an
way.
example. So, you know, if I may go so far as to say, I believe Trump is a prime example of showing us what love isn't. You know, and
That's an interesting way of putting it.
Yeah.
I read somewhere somebody said, some meme on social media is like, will somebody just give the man a hug?
right.
Will somebody just give him some love?
Right. And you know what? We can do that. I have sympathy for any human being, whether it's a young boy or a young girl who lacks love at their critical stages of early life. And you see it in this man. It's very clear he had no love, not in the way that we understand it. And that as they mature, it twists their whole perspective and worldview, especially regarding love, into something that where greed becomes a thing that's good. Are you kidding me? Greed and empire building and, you know, hoarding.
That becomes associated with love. And so therefore that becomes the prime directive. And then it creates a big mess for everybody.
Well, yeah, especially when somebody is put like that, is put into a position of responsibility. But I am really grateful. Honestly, I know I may get some flack for this, but I am grateful at this time to have an example like him leading a country. And it's so blatantly obvious to anyone who's got a heart to see that this man is lacking love, has lacked love his entire life, and I feel bad for him. I really feel sorry for him. And I do pray for him. I do. I don't bash him. I have a Facebook page. I don't bash him on Facebook. I don't say anything, frankly, because he's such a lightning rod of controversy. You have to pick a side. You know what? My side is love. Love is the answer to all problems, and this man clearly needs love. If he were to walk in the room, I'd walk up to him and I'd hug him, if he'd let me. You know, and because he needs it. He really needs our love.
Yeah, it's true, and it's also interesting how that particular pattern, you know, if that was his relationship with his father, and then his father's relationship was probably similar with his grandfather, how these patterns can cycle through generations.
That's right.
And then what it takes, that leadership that it takes, that internal leadership that it takes to break that cycle, and how much what the kind of leadership it takes from all of us to overcome our judgments and extend love to somebody who is not an example of it for us.
Right.
Yeah, it's just like anything we're wanting to heal or transform in our lives. If we want to truly heal it, we have to feel compassion, like you're feeling. We have to like open up to that resistance and whatever we're trying to heal with an openness of love. And as we start to love it from the inside out and from the outside in, then it starts to transmute. And this is so important, so relevant. Thank you for bringing it up, because I have 16-year-old twin boys. One of them is working here on set over the next 10 days. And I feel like I'm constantly working and building the business and striving hard. And I'm actually almost tearing up right now because I realize like how much I love them, and I don't know if they know that. Mm-hmm. And it's tough to find that balance between like building and growing and developing our passion, and also, you know, loving our kids and loving our family.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, it's true.
Beautiful.
And so it is, you know, one of the things I'm most proud of is having, you know, founded my first company, Netrex, at a time that I had a young daughter who was a baby. You know, at the time that I started my company, she was just 2 years old. And I made it a priority to be there for her, to be a regular part of her life and establish certain traditions that I honored, like dinner. As you know, I wasn't at dinner every night, but I was there, you know, 5-6 nights of the week usually, unless I was traveling. And of course, I traveled; I couldn't be there. I got up and helped make her breakfast. I drove her to school every day. That was a tradition that we established, and our dog got in the car. It was a family affair. You know, the dog in the car, my daughter in the car in the back seat, and my wife with me very often, and we drove her to school every day. And so those became regular traditions in our nuclear family that really established a foundation of love that bonded me with the rest of my family.
Yeah.
Especially my daughter, who
That's beautiful.
And so this is about being a leader of love, being a leadership or a role model. And it's a perfect time to share, you know, some of my own secrets and success. I consider my daughter my #1 success in life.
Wonderful. I love that.
And she's my pride and joy. And Erica, if you're watching this in Philadelphia, hi.
Hi.
We love you.
We love you. We hear about you all the time.
Yes, I do share how much I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
So these are the things that are important. Most important are our family members and the people that bring us joy. And as parents, we have a responsibility to honor our role as a leader of love and to share that love with our children at a critical time in their growth, especially as infants and adolescents. Without that leadership, it really runs the risk of you having a situation like we have with our current president.
Absolutely. So it's how to strike that balance between being a provider and a father figure and wanting to create a good life for your children, and also being there when they need you in that critical moment, so they don't grow up to become damaged in any way, or worst case scenario, a full-blown psychopath.
Right.
So that's really interesting, because our last segment today, our planetary intelligence segment with Dr. Roger Nelson and Adam Curry from the Princeton Global Consciousness Project, they have developed an incredible tracking technology and they will talk about this much better than me, so forgive me for not really knowing it in great detail, where they're able to track the speed and the degree and the volume at which people are waking up on our planet. They can actually measure it. And waking up being really the indication of the heart, the growth that's going on in the heart and the healing that's happening in the heart when we are faced with these issues of striking the balance between work and family, or whatever it is that's going on in our own personal path and development. and to track how that's occurring and where it's occurring the most on the planet. And what they're seeing, and they will also again talk about this, is that there is an incredible exponential growth going on in people waking up and breaking these cycles and breaking these patterns and choosing a new paradigm and a better way of being. So that's going to be really exciting.
And along those notes, they've also developed, we're actually tracking a lot of the data that's happening in this event. So for those of you that are watching, if you go to the harmonicconvergence2020.org, and you go and click on register, you may have already registered, but you'll notice that this time when you register, there's a little box that pops up. And in that box, there's an option to take like the scientific survey. So we really encourage you to go and participate with us, because the more data that we collect, the more we're going to be able to create these models and develop them out and create that feedback loop for all of us.
Absolutely. And before that segment, we have another incredible segment today where our dear friend Rave Mehta interviewed Ron Garan. And Ron is a former NASA astronaut and currently a public speaker and author of several amazing books. And he has orbited the planet over 1,200 times.
Wow.
On the International Space Station, and has had a direct experience of the overview effect. And he's going to be talking to us about that.
Now that's compelling.
Yes.
I can't wait to watch it. I haven't seen the interview yet, but Rave is a dear friend, our dear friend, and I'm just so happy that Rave is part of this event, because he and I met him the same day I met you, and of course he came to Egypt with us when you both came with me to Egypt back in 2017, and I'm just delighted. Rave, if you're watching, I love you, brother, and sorry I haven't talked to you in a little while, but I'm delighted to learn that you've done this interview, and I can't wait. And you know, these people, especially astronauts who have such credibility and haven't been able to speak publicly, haven't been given a platform.
It's true.
We're doing that here. We have brought some incredible people, and for free, people online can watch and hear directly from the horse's mouth. I'm not calling you know, our astronauts horses by any means, but you know, you can hear them, and what they're going to share with you, you have to accept. It's the truth. You know, it's not a belief. This is truth. And that's what we're trying to bring to the public, is truth. And through truth, we wake up to a reality, to the actual reality that in Cloud Atlas, the movie that features Tom Hanks and Halle Berry. If you want to really see a great movie, I encourage that. But you know, there's a part of that where they call it the true. You know, and I love
the true. Tune in for the true.
We're giving you the true.
Yeah, tune in for the true. And I'm working in reverse order before that. Then we have another interview live from England with Richard Rudd, the author of The Gene Keys and a master of human design. And just, it is really just, we're so thrilled.
His story is fascinating.
Amazing story. So there's a lot of exciting segments in store for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in and for watching. Please share the words, share the links, share the content. It's all free and available to you. It's a gift to the world by Mark Sims, and we're very grateful for this gift because it's helping us all. So thank you today for your time, and enjoy. And we'll look forward to continuing this journey with you.
Later, guys.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen of the Harmonic Convergence 2020 family. I am so excited to be here today because we're going to talk about my favorite topic, and that is love. Mark, how are we feeling about discussing just about the most important thing in the universe?
It is. It's the source of everything, and it's my favorite subject to talk about. I think it was on day one with you, we talked about the nature of unconditional love, and what Tejbar said, that mastering unconditional love was the key to ascension after the physical death and the final lifetime or incarnation in the physical realm. I asked him the question, well, what is unconditional love, and how does one master it? And he said, that's for you to discover on your own. So I then set out to do my own research, and it's so funny how we take the word love for granted. We use it for such a diverse set of situations, and is my personal belief and experience that it's thrown around too loosely, and that furthermore, there's all sorts of words for love that we don't use. The Greeks, for instance, had 13 different words for love, agape being one of them, the love of family and community, as an example, which is very different from eros, the word that's associated with passionate love, and many more. And so I, as a student of love in those early days on my journey to discover unconditional love, I learned a lot about love and my relationship to love. And through the relationships that I've had with people throughout my life, my daughter, my mother, my first wife, for instance, and many other people, that I would regularly tell them I loved them. But I knew that the love I had for each of them was unique and different. I think that's an important thing for people to contemplate, is their personal relationship with love and with those that they love, and thinking about how they can strengthen that relationship and understand why it's really a sacred thing, love is. And I think because we're conditioned through the media, through entertainment, and love is often used to entertain us, or otherwise used as a tool to draw us in and manipulate us into doing things behaviorally. And I think that's one of the lessons that we're learning, is that we need to be more aware of our relationship to people that we love and to love itself.
I would actually love for you to tell me a little bit about the love story playing itself out celestially right now. What is going on astrologically through the lens of love? Because I know you have the scoop, and it's a really good one.
Well, those are two big questions, both very big questions. One is the relationship of this harmonic convergence to the first, and then the question of what's the bigger picture and story regarding love as far as my sources. I'll just start by saying this, and I said it moments ago, and that is everything is love. Literally, everything is love. God is love, and from God radiates love in all of its forms. Energy, which is heat and light and other frequencies. Really, heat and light are just frequencies in the electromagnetic spectrum. And they manifest in the physical reality as heat and light and other things. Electrons is a photon, which is a form of an electron. All these things are frequencies that manifest into physical objects. Even matter, made up of atoms, are made up of subatomic particles like protons and neutrons, and they themselves can be further divided into things like quarks and gluons and fermions and neutrinos and bosons and all the things that we find in the classic model of the elementary particle table, right? And what we discovered in science recently through things like superstring theory is that when we attempt to come up with a theory of everything, to explain everything that we observe in the universe, superstring tells us that really when we continue to divide constituent units of matter or energy further, we get to that point where we can no longer divide it further. And what we discover, what physicists have discovered, are that the fundamental constituent of energy or matter is a thing called a string. And that string vibrates based on the energy imbued into it at a certain frequency, and that gives rise to what that elementary particle is in the periodic table, or not the periodic table, but in the standard model of the elementary particles. And you mentioned neutrinos is one of those, and that's right. And then fermions and bosons and electron,
So is it safe to say then that love acts more like a wave than a particle in our more traditional understanding of things?
I don't know I'd go that far. I just think that, love is the source. And as it radiates out from the source, it will find a stabilization based on the energy imbued upon it from source, in which it will then manifest into something physical. And then that string aggregates with other strings to give rise to things like protons and neutrons and electrons. Well, electrons is a special case.
And therefore everything that is composed by matter. When we get to those bigger levels, where we're talking
so
about
these
molecules.
things aggregate once again to create atoms, which is made up of nucleus with neutrons and protons, and around its shell or orbiting are electrons. And so that is the first unit of matter. And we call it matter because it has mass. It's a stable particle that we can measure, and it behaves like every other element of its type. Like a hydrogen atom with one electron and one proton behaves exactly like another atom of hydrogen. But when we, smush these two things together in a process we call fusion, we end up with a nucleus with two protons and two electrons on the outside, and that is helium. Or do I have? Yeah, helium is the second element, and so on. So we get the heavier elements through this process of smushing hydrogen together. With that idea in mind, if you believe in the concept that love is the source to all this energy that accumulates and aggregates to give rise to physical matter, what we can think of it is that it's just love tied in a knot, or light tied in a knot. And that gives it the property we call mass, a weight. And that is what the physical universe really is all about, is matter that has weight or mass associated with it.
It's almost like gradations of the same thing, different densities.
Yeah, and the density thing you can talk about in the physical realm in terms of the periodic table of elements, which the lightest is hydrogen, and the heaviest gets around a nucleus with 100 protons in it, and plutonium, uranium kind of fall way, and that's very, very dense matter, right? Heavy stuff. And it becomes unstable when it becomes too dense and can radiate harmful energy that we know as gamma rays and X-rays, things that can harm the biological body.
And so we're talking about the relationship of these different molecular structures to a certain extent. So we're talking about a relativity of seemingly separate things, right? And we're talking about the harmonic convergence and what the relative positioning of the planets does for the specific happening in the world right now. So you mentioned at the beginning of this that there's a similarity between, or I mentioned rather, but I want the scoop from you, that there's a similarity in the alignments and the way that those, if we were to think of them, let's say, as molecules, the planets, that the way that they're behaving with each other.
Right.
What are those conditions creating? What's happening on an esoteric or philosophical level as it relates to love? What is this alignment bringing us?
I haven't thought about that, but I'll take a stab at answering your question. We'll see where this goes. But, you know, if we think of the solar system as a model and equate that model with the model of the atom, where you have a nucleus representing the sun and the electrons orbiting at specific distances away from the sun or from the nucleus, and we call these orbitals. Where the individual electrons exist, that orbit. So the rule for an atom is that for every proton in the nucleus, you have an electron in the orbit of the nucleus. So with that model in mind, equating these two very large-scale solar system to a very tiny atom, if you could imagine all the electrons in an atom lining up in a line, what effect would that have on the nucleus? For just that split moment, that split second or microsecond, it's going to affect the nucleus.
Right, because the electrons carry that negative charge, so
That's
somehow
right.
something's going to shift and move.
That's right. So if you move all the negative electron charge to one side of the nucleus, what's the physical effect of this?
Right.
And
is it tension? Is it an expansion?
Right.
So
it's what we can agree on, whatever it is. It's much different than the typical situation in which the electrons are, at random locations around the nucleus, creating some balance and having less of effect overall on that atom. The same is true for our solar system, that when the planets are in alignment, there's a gravitational effect along a vector. We can think of it as a line in the direction of the planets from the sun. And we're one of those planets. And we're right in the middle, right? So it's going to affect us somehow.
So we're susceptible to all of the movements of the planets in one way or another, and that's what astrology tells us.
That's right.
And I love that you mentioned the Greeks at the beginning of this, because astrology and the Greeks get along really well, symbolically, right?
Uh-huh.
So if we look at the actual alignment of what is occurring right now during this harmonic convergence, and we consider the planets and who they represent from an archetypal standpoint, is there a story for us to uncover?
There are two things. There's the alignment and the implications of that and the effect it has on humanity. Mm-hmm. It's just intriguing, the idea that the planets align, and that would be noteworthy and be something we should be paying attention to and maybe even celebrate because it's so rare. In fact, I did the research on a 7-planet alignment, which is what we have during the Harmonic Convergence 2020. It's never happened before in the written record. I could not find an example of it. I did find an example of a 6-planet alignment, and a quote from a NASA scientist who says it only happens every 100 years or so. And so in the history of astrology, in which astrologers were sophisticated enough to map and record alignment of the planets, there's probably been only 2 or 3 alignments of 6 planets in recorded history. Never 7.
So could it be possible that this alignment is something that planetarily is happening to bring us back to a more loving frequency?
I think that it's more than that, in the sense that it's a event that draws attention to itself and has people intrigued, especially if we're curious. And I think most people are, especially about the planets and everything that's been going on the last few years regarding our place in the universe, and the Kepler telescope and others that are Hubble that are looking out among the cosmos, and we're discovering not just amazing worlds or stars and nebulas and so on, and how vast the universe is, but we're also now for the first time discovering exoplanets that we know for sure are orbiting stars all around the universe. And today,
reinforcing this idea that we're not alone.
Of course,
right?
Of course. So we're waking up as a human family to the reality that chances are we're not alone.
Right.
And
that contributes then to this notion of what exactly that means. Because to me, I hear that, and it implies two things. It gives me comfort in knowing, we're not alone.
Right.
But it's also a call to action of, hey, you're responsible. You're a steward of something. Take care of it, This is to be shared with other people. And seeing as love is the filter for this conversation, I can't help but wonder what in your journey, in your cultivation towards unconditional love, you may have discovered through either the teachings of Tejbar or your personal experience that you feel our audience would benefit from knowing.
Well, to cut to the chase, it's the discovery of what mastering unconditional love is and what that opens the door to. And my discovery through years of research on the topic of unconditional love is that the mastering of unconditional love that Tejbar referred to when he talked about this requirement to ascending to the next level of our conscious evolution is a mastering of self-unconditional love, or unconditional love for the self. That is where it begins. So we all have things we regret in our lives, mistakes that we make that we wish we could do over. But we wouldn't be who we are without making mistakes. And so we're really they're to be honored and appreciated instead of regretted. And when we begin to embrace our mistakes and realize that they are informative and teach us critical lessons in our spiritual development, magic begins to happen because we can forgive ourselves truly.
They become pathways to awarenesses that can open the hose to more love. It's like you're removing kinks, right?
Right.
Every relationship and every experience, whether good or bad, helps you almost take into account where you are.
Right.
If I'm feeling something that is a contrast to this emotion of love that I know to be the truth, then there's a kink.
Yeah.
And I got to get in there and try to figure out what that is to not just open myself to give more, but to also receive.
Yeah.
Right?
For the people watching this, I would recommend an exercise in unconditional love of the self, and that is to once a day, maybe in the morning when you're getting cleaned up for after your shower, you look in the mirror, look into your eyes, gaze into your own eyes, and just say, I love you. That's it. Just say, I love you. Thank you. I can't recommend that practice highly enough. Of all the things that I would recommend, it's that, number one. And then, the meditation, singing the hue, would be my second recommendation. If you just did those two things, and it doesn't take a lot of time, this is the accelerated path to love, to understanding and embodying love.
I'm trying to weave here. So if love is the vehicle for ascension, if our relationships are our vehicle to practice and express and receive love, if the planets are influencing what's happening on this planet, planetary alignments and everything, how do we explain and move forward from the situation that we find ourselves in planetarily? Because very close to the situation, it feels like a massive amount of discord, upheaval, hate. It feels heavy. It doesn't feel very loving at all. But from a celestial perspective, from a Tejbar perspective, there's probably something happening there that we're just maybe not identifying. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that we're just evolving through a process that requires, or I shouldn't say require, but more accurately, I would refer to it as a natural process, and part of that natural process is what we're going through right now. when we evolve from simpler life forms, animals that really struggle to survive, they develop techniques and instincts that improve their chances for survival. And that gets ingrained in the DNA, so it's passed on, to future generations, these habits that lead to improving our chance of survival as animals. And one of those things is fear. If you're not afraid of a predator, you're not going to last long in the wild. So fear is a very valuable emotion.
Useful emotion if worked with correctly.
Well,
right?
yeah, and as an animal, it's good to be afraid of most things that that you don't know what it is. If it's bigger than you
right.
and it looks scary, run away.
Right.
And so we carry that in our DNA, that emotional baggage, and it affects our intellect. We're now evolving to a point where our minds and our consciousness is at a point where we can begin to control our fears using reason and logic. The boogeyman in the closet that used to scare us as a kid no longer scares us as an adult, because we learned that really that's just me scaring myself. There's really no boogeyman. But as a kid, I don't know about you, but there were times at night that I imagined there was a real monster in my closet, right? And it scared the bejesus out of me. Mm-hmm. And I would pull the sheets over my head and turn the light on in my room. And, but as an adult, I never did that because I realized that was not true.
Through empirical kind of understanding and witnessing that wasn't the case.
But that fear of the boogeyman, I believe, is a consequence of our ancestral roots as evolving from primitive animals and primitive man.
Absolutely. I mean, I read somewhere the other day that they did a study, I believe it was in silkworms, where they were put through a traumatic event, mm-hmm. and that encoded in the DNA for every subsequent generation for 12 generations, the shift in the code created by that trauma showed itself.
Yeah,
so there is such a thing as ancestral trauma.
Absolutely.
Just like there are behavioral components to it, there's also something inherent in our blueprints that carries a little bit of the past with it. So it's almost as if we're cleaning the house.
Yeah.
It's all coming to life so we can clean out the house.
Right. And I believe racial division and racism is a direct result of this history, of our evolutionary history, that anything that looked different than us, we were scared of. And that was a good survival thing. It was, we usually survived or had better success at survival when we created barriers between ourselves and anything or anyone that looked different than us.
Right. Well, we were far less sophisticated in terms of like our development and the way that we functioned with each other. Mm.
So I want to, put draw attention to this question of racism. I think it's one of the real root causes of this situation we're in today. With Black Lives Matter and the indigenous peoples of the world that have been oppressed, and genocide, the victims of genocide on an institutional level has created such terrible karma and resentment within those communities that have been the victims of this, are rising up. And the good thing that they're rising up. And for those of us that can empathize with their history and their story and what they go through on a daily basis, it's important that we continue to empathize and support them.
To the extent that we can, right? Because we are still in the physical plane, so it would be hard for us to empathize completely.
Well, yeah. I mean, somebody who's lived with a lifetime of racist oppression and everything that goes with that, it's hard for someone living with white privilege to associate.
Absolutely.
But we can imagine what it must be like. We hear stories. We see the injustice in the world and how people of color are discriminated against or otherwise abused and murdered. We have an obligation, those of us that have privilege, to stand up for them and join them, because any injustice is not just an injustice of that people, it's an injustice for us all.
Looking at the situation that the world is in right now through the lens of love, what does leadership look like? What do we need to do to get ourselves to a place where we can start practicing the unconditional love that is what eventually will set us free?
Well, I guess there's a couple of things I'd like to say in answer to that question. Number one, there's the leadership of the individual, you. How can you change your own behaviors to be a leader, to cause positive change in the world, be the future that you want to see? And so there's that, and I went through that process before my experience. I literally started looking at myself in the mirror and saying, how can I become the change I want to see in the world? What is it I'm doing that is, contributing to this status quo and the problems? What do I need to do to be a source of positive change within myself? That, I think, really was an important step in my spiritual evolution before my experience with Tejbar, and may have been one of the key triggers for me to have that experience with Tejbar. Because I made an effort, a conscious effort every day to think, how am I going to make a positive difference in the world today? How am I going to be an example, a role model, a leader for positive change?
And did what you practiced before Tejbar change after Tejbar?
Yeah, I think I just took it to a whole new level.
Okay.
I was really focused more on myself and developing myself as a leader and being a representative of positive change. I wanted to behave in a way that was consistent with a future that I wanted for the world and for myself. Mm-hmm. So that was that. And then after Tejbar, when I was then aware of the higher realms and the beings in these higher realms and their relationship to us and what their mission is with regards to Earth, my leadership role evolved into one that I'm, taking on now with you at this very moment. It's taken a lot of work and courage and dedication for me to get to this point where I'm so comfortable with it. And now I'm very proud of myself, and I'm not looking back, and I know I'm going to be fine, and everything's going to be fine in the end. It's just a question of what kind of trouble, and is this going to be easy road? Are we going to make it easy because of what's going to happen soon? Are people going to wake up and get on the bandwagon, so to speak, and be instruments of positive change themselves and join us? Mm-hmm. Or are they going to continue to, struggle and stick to their belief systems that are in direct opposition to the kind of things we're talking about? Are they going to remain closed-minded and racist, or otherwise not care about justice and truth? These two things, justice and truth, are at the heart of it. And love is the third component. Love, justice, and truth are, to me, a type of trinity that represent an ethical code, a personal constitution that we embody to direct our behavior and our energy. And if you don't have truth, if you don't value truth, and if you don't value justice, you're lost. You're lost, and we are all lost. And that's what we're dealing with right now, is the injustice in the world, the unfairness, the bigotry, and all that represents a true lack of love, a real lack of love, and we need to wake up to it.
What would an interdimensional being's advice, since they're not constrained by time, so what would Tejbar's advice be on how to handle the fact that this will be a marathon and not a sprint, because evolution takes time?
Right. It takes time.
So what do you think, or has he shared anything with you on this?
We've spoken on the subject of time quite extensively. It's very important. So in the Universal Consciousness Development Chart that describes all the 26 dimensions of reality, 15 of which are conscious dimensions, 9 of which are dimensions of freedom, and then there are 2 dimensions of time, the linear time that we experience, and then there's imaginary time. And imaginary time is a concept in which we can utilize something, this imaginary time, to manifest something that we wish for ourselves. So, for example, if we want to plan an event like the Harmonic Convergence, if you want to make that happen in some distant future, because you know it's going to take time, you use your imaginary timeline to project into the future that event, and then you figure out, what do I need to do to get to that vision in the future from the point I'm at now? And you'd identify the milestones, you know, it's steps, you know, baby steps that eventually get you there. And I've been on this, doing this for 5 years, so I've been putting a lot of work into what are those milestones, what are the key steps that get you ultimately to the goal. And that's all done by utilizing imaginary time. It's a dimension of consciousness that we access with our brains. And it works in forward and in reverse. So for instance, if there's a memory that we recall that's very fond to us maybe, we can access the imaginary timeline, go back in the Akashic record and recall that memory, pull it into the CPU, which is our brain, and then relive it. And some people are so good at it, they can not only relive that memory and recall it, but they can see it, they can smell it. Some people recall the fragrances, if that was a big part of that experience. And of course, the emotional energy comes back to us. We kind of marinate in a warm memory.
The pieces that are coming together for me is what we're experiencing right now in a linear perspective might be the truth part of that. We're starting to see the truth of what is, so that then we can find the justice in it and get back to love.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I want to say that utilizing something like imaginary time allows us, gives us human beings a unique skill or ability to manifest a future for not just ourselves individually, but collectively. And that's what this is about. What future do we want to build for ourselves, for this world? We see all the craziness and chaos and uncertainty and fear that we're in right now. We don't want to be there. That's not our future. For those of us that are optimistic and see beyond that, the day when we can be unified as a human family and embrace our diversity, which is really a thing to be celebrated. It's so clear to me that somebody who's a racist is a very low conscious individual. They're a first grader in the school of life. And so my attitude about them is that they're a first grader. They're just probably in their first few incarnations, and they come with that racist is so tied to their DNA and the animal kingdom that they came through to get
that fear response.
Yeah, that fear response that they're they're in their first few incarnations as a human being, and so they haven't grown spiritually yet to transmute that fear that came through many, many lifetimes as an animal. That leads to the realization that when you are in a school with first graders and you may be an upperclassman, that doesn't make that person, a first grader, any less important than you. They're just younger. They're less spiritually developed. They still deserve to be respected and loved, but they need to be encouraged and taught as a first grader from, keeping that attitude as they become adults.
So letting love lead the way.
Letting love lead the way is a good way to put it. So I think that's our responsibility, those of us that are upperclassmen, to realize that we have a responsibility, an obligation to be of service to the underclassmen, to help them raise their vibrational energy, their love quotient, and embrace these ideas that can change their lives and help them accelerate their spiritual development. And that's where we're at.
So could you say that maybe that's what Tejbar is doing with you?
In
terms of development and consciousness?
Well, yeah. I would like to think that I'm not a first grader.
No, but I mean, Tejbar being, the upperclassman in this way.
He's the professor.
Okay.
Right, and I'm the college student, and I'm doing very well, and I happen to have met him at a time when I was ready for a spiritual mentor or professor. And I requested that. I wanted, I was seeking truth in the question of what's going on with the ETs. What is this real? Mm-hmm. And if it is, what's going on with that? Who are they? What's their agenda? Where are they from? What's the relationship to us? Why are they so aloof? I mean, there's really key questions we should be asking ourselves.
Totally.
And when you dive into that and you study the books from authors that have had relationships with ETs, and there's many, people don't know this. Mm-hmm. There are many very credible witnesses that have written many books on the subject about what they learned. And I can relate to them because I have gone through similar experiences as them, and I've learned a lot from their relationships and what they write. What you learn is that there are good answers to these questions, these key questions. And now it's time to share them
that. With the world.
Right.
Got it. Getting somebody from a very low vibrational emotion like fear or hate or rage to unconditional love is a tall order.
It is.
But there is a range of emotions in between that can help, or tools like curiosity that can slowly take you to a place where you're open to receiving more love.
Right. If we're successful, will result in a global contact. And it's going to be a benign kind of thing. And what has been told to me, that one possibility, the most likely, is that they will appear in the sky from horizon to horizon and above us as a point of light about the brightness of Venus. And that it'll be a certain pattern in the sky, a triangular pattern, kind of like if you imagine a geodesic dome above you, and at every junction point in the dome, you've got a point of light. That will give you an idea of what we're talking about. So they will appear when they're asked to appear by us, we, the human family, or a representative number of the human family, will come together and set that intention and give them permission to show themselves. And, hopefully they will show themselves for some period of time, and then they'll just go away. But they'll leave everyone who's seen this with the realization we're not alone. Mm. And that they're right here. Not only is there life elsewhere in the universe, they appear to be right here in our backyard. And even closer than that. So that triggers curiosity in a way that I think will lead to breakthroughs in consciousness by the individual and ultimately collectively. And there's going to be a big shift. I think it's a very good thing. There certainly will be people that are afraid, but there will be a lot of people that are initially afraid that will gradually become more open to the possibility that they're benevolent. And then it's, from there, I think it's better. They learn really who they are, and that's what comes after the harmonic convergence. There's really going to be a lot of emphasis placed on who they really are, what their relationship is to us, and why are they now showing themselves, and what's the purpose of that. It's exciting. It's really at the bottom line to all this is that the story of Earth, our origin story, is the most incredible story ever told in the universe. And that is true. I can't imagine something more epic.
I mean, prior to meeting you, I couldn't imagine merging with an alien, but now I'm actually open to the possibility. And I can imagine a lot of our viewers at home will be in different parts of that spectrum of skepticism.
Sure.
Right? What can we do if we're thinking as our more highly evolved selves, as an interdimensional being, to bring ourselves back to a loving place when we're not there?
Yeah. Well, I think the secret is with thought, controlling thoughts. So when we get depressed or angry or sad, that can have a prolonged effect on our psyche if we don't bring ourselves out of it. And we often stew in these negative emotions too long, and then it's tough to dig out. So just being aware that if we're depressed or sad for an extended long of time, is that a place you really want to stay in and be? If you really want to embrace love, and as a consequence, the things associated with love, happiness, joy, it really begins with the power of thought. And again, I have to go back to what Tejbar told me about the power of thought consciousness. And he said, this was the most important thing he could ever teach me. And that I had put into this picture. So this is Tejbar. This was given to me the morning of our communion on the 16th of November, 2012. And it says, the power of thought consciousness. Your thoughts are very powerful in that they influence the creation of the now, the only reality. This is why it is so important to think positively in the moment and about the future. This is the key to happiness. Wish for good things for yourself and those you love, and never let sadness, anger, frustration, or depression stay with you for long. In short, your thoughts create your emotions, your reality, and contribute to the universal reality. So, I think most people, unless you're severely mentally handicapped or ill, have the ability to recognize when they're not happy, when they're experiencing one of these emotions, negative emotions like anger. Mm-hmm. That should be an indicator immediately that you're not in a loving place and that you're probably ruminating or otherwise focusing on something negative. Mm-hmm. So stop it. Just change your thought. Try to think of anything that makes you happy, that puts a smile on your face. Maybe it was a pet that you had as a child, and a memory with that pet, or a friend that you used to hang out with that you miss. But that memory brings back a positive feeling. Any technique to get control of your mind and the thoughts that are created by the ego. And I'll say this too, that the ego is like a monkey. You know, if you don't keep it busy, it's going to cause trouble. And so give it positive reinforcement to think about things, or, to do things that are positive, that keep you busy, either with work that you enjoy or, thinking about things that bring you joy, bring you happiness. And keep the monkey busy with that stuff. All right. Because otherwise the monkey will take over.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. We are going back to the practice of love. Practice being loving with yourself. Practice being loving with others. And make sure that those inputs that you are giving that monkey mind of yours are good ones so that you can continue running the show.
Venimos del pataste y el cacao, el renacimiento de todas las cosas buenas, el renacimiento del mundo, el renacimiento de todo lo bien, de la paz y el amor.
Los ancestros han dejado a cada cultura, a cada etnia, a cada grupo su forma de practicar la espiritualidad y su forma de la conexión.
remember just opening my eyes and just looking at the stars, and everything felt so clear and liberating. So I got a strong calling there to really dive deeper into cacao.
Júncame, Bucúpcame, los jefes del inframundo dijeron, no deben acercarse nadie en este árbol, fueron prohibidos. Pero viene la hija de Hunahpu, que se llamaba Ixquic, burló la guardia, al acercarse quedó mirando el cráneo de Hunahpu. Entonces Hunahpu dijo, pon su mano. Así extendió su mano y deje caer como su baba, en forma de baba, pero es la semilla del cacao que cayó en la mano de Ixquic, y en ese entonces quedó preñado la doncella. Ixquic tuvo a luz los gemelos, Hunahpu Bishbalanque. De ahí viene el origen del sagrado cacao.
Se sabe ya por estudios científicos de la botánica del cacao que el cacao sí tiene un origen en Guatemala. Sí hay unas semillas que se remontan a millones de años atrás, que sí se propagó naturalmente en Guatemala en un clima muy apto, que era como el de la costa sur. Una cultura olmeca que existió en la democracia, en Escuintla, unos 2000 años antes de los mayas. ¿Qué hacían los olmecas aquí? ¿Qué venían a sacar? Una población solo se sitúa si hay un recurso sumamente valioso para poderlo explotar hasta otro lugar, ¿verdad? Tenemos toda esa línea de boca costa, 700 a 1000 metros de altura. Tenían el sotobosque a su favor y los nutrientes de los volcanes, exquisita en suelo, en lluvia, agua, precipitación. Ahí se adaptó el cacao y ahí le gustó. Entonces ahí es donde yo podría decir que el origen del cacao viene mucho de esta parte de la costa sur.
El cacao es algo que se ha adaptado muy bien en nuestra comunidad, en nuestro suelo. Es una fruta que no tiene que madurar tanto para la cosecha, para que tenga todos los azúcares bien concentrados adentro de la mazorca. Y es así como hemos aprendido a cosecharla, llevarla a un centro de fermentación.
Desde generación en generación son reconocidas en este pueblo por su trabajo. El tostado del cacao. Conocen exactamente el punto del tostado del cacao. El fuego consta de 3 piedras. El símbolo cosmogónico, que es el triángulo del sol, de la luna y de la tierra, que es el que nos sostiene.
Ya tostado, se pela a mano y esto hace que se vuelva material para moler.
Todo lo que se consume molido, nuestras abuelas, nuestras ancestras trabajaban con la piedra de moler. El fuego tiene que estar adentro de la piedra de moler para calentarlo bien. Ya que está caliente, ya se empieza a proceder con el molido del cacao. Después del molido del cacao, pues se procede al agua caliente. Se necesita siempre del batido, es la forma de que como el humo se va como ofrenda a nuestros ancestros.
Cuando nosotros consumimos el cacao, no es solo por consumir tampoco, sino que es una concentración que se hace desde la madre tierra con todos los seres de la naturaleza.
Cuando es una ceremonia, siempre el fuego sagrado. El fuego sagrado que es guiado por un guía espiritual. Y ante El fuego se presenta, se ofrenda la bebida del cacao. Se invoca el espíritu del cacao, el espíritu del aire, del fuego, de la tierra, el espíritu del agua. Uno toma el cacao para meditar, para decir gracias por lo que tengo, por lo que soy, por lo que necesito. Es tu conexión con el fuego y es tu conexión y eso que hace que la medicina, que el cacao que tienes dentro empieza a recorrer en tus venas, empieza a oxigenarte más para abrir tu mente, para dejar el miedo, abrir tu palabra, la voz del cacao, la voz que viene para poder expresarte. Además de lo espiritual, es lo físico que puede producir el cacao, la alegría, la fortaleza, la fuerza, la energía física que puede dar.
Por eso su nombre dice en nuestro idioma Kokof. Kof es la fuerza.
Cacao is one of the richest foods in magnesium, supporting heart health, relaxing the muscles, the joints, the nervous system, and optimal brain health. Another powerful component of cacao is tryptophan. Tryptophan is a precursor to serotonin. The combination of tryptophan and magnesium supports serotonin release in the brain. Theobromine is also found in cacao. Theobromine is known for being a vasodilator, allowing the blood vessels to relax and stimulating blood flow. These components create a beautiful duality of feeling awake and energized, while also feeling relaxed, bringing a balance of feeling clarity and focus.
Es el alimento sagrado para el cuerpo, para el espíritu, para la mente, para el corazón.
¿Cuál es el espíritu? ¿Cuál es la intención que se le pone desde el corte, desde la preparación del cacao? El cacao es amor. El cacao te muestra toda su ternura que nos forma, que nos guía, que nos transforma como una bebida. Y es el respeto, conocer el espíritu del cacao. La espiritualidad no se trata de una competencia, no se trata de quién sabe más ni quién sabe menos, se trata del que respeta más. Si tienes un respeto, el espíritu mismo te habla, el espíritu mismo, los abuelos, los ancestros te guían. Esa es la guía que puedes recibir con tu corazón, con la conexión de tu mente hacia el sagrado fuego, hacia la medicina.
lives matter worldwide till the end of time. We rising up. Can't nobody stop us. The love we got's colossal. We rising up. White supremacy, your throne's about to topple. We rising up. All imposters of power petrified like fossils. Keep the glow in my smile. I ain't big and I ain't mild and I ain't running. No, I ain't running. Wear my shoes, walk a mile, left my stride in my profile. Yeah, yeah. We're rising up. We are rising.
Never survive, taking a stride, break all the modes they used to contrive. We be alive no matter the gun. Nooses and whips, we be our son. Constant repeat, inside the lie. We be the truth no matter the time. Yeah, we arrive, fist in the sky, shatter the virus. We be the ones. We be strong inside this fight no matter what. Don't be polite. Make this freedom look so bright. Running at the speed of light. The saints are on our side. Look at how we ride. We don't need your guns. We got people power and a plan with the divine. Mira para allá, tira pa' acá la historia en una lanza que nos quiere asesinar, pero la gente se resiste. Resistance is a natural response. How you gonna tell me that we ain't bound for freedom? Man, you can't trick us. We got eyes to see us. We be looking beautiful despite your amnesia. Against the contagious, trigger happy fever. Your violence needs a surgical procedure.
You try to go. We can be stopped. We can be stopped. Tick-tock, now is the time, and we are one. In the glow, in my smile, I ain't big and I ain't mild and I ain't running. No, I ain't running. Wear my shoes, walk around, left my stride in my profile. Yeah, yeah. We're rising up. We're rising up. Black people are powerful beyond measure, beautiful beyond imagination. The children of cosmic dust wrapped in enigma made flesh. Black people are supernatural, drum magic and time travel. Black people are rising. Black people are significant, magnificent, omnipresent, resilient, immeasurable, unstoppable, indispensable, brilliant. Black people are eternal, ancient ancestors of the entire planet. Black people are breathtaking, the creators of this nation, the cornerstone of liberation. Black people are genius. Black people are people on a mission to get free by any means necessary. Black people are my heart, my soul, my breath. Black people are the source. Black people are a gorgeous rebellion by the simple act of being born. Trade, no plantation, KKK, no great migration, second rate, no fake food, prison schools, mind games, self-hate, overworked and underpaid, we survive it anyway.
Como fue, como sea, como quiere que lo veas, vamos a ganar. En la tierra de los libres se liberan las ideas. Otro mundo es posible cuando el rebelde lo imagina y el sabio lo planea.
We rising up. Black lives matter worldwide till the end of time. We rising up. From the top to the bottom, Ghana, Haiti, and Harmonic. We rising up. My dignified black people got one thing in common. We rising up. No matter what we're tossed, our seeds will blossom. We rising up.
Hello and welcome to the Harmonic Convergence 2020. My name is Shiraya Dharma and I'll be your host today with our guest, Michael Tellinger. Michael is a scientist, a researcher, and a humanitarian who has delved deep into ancient history, many codes that this ancient history has for how we're living today, but also just super amazing information about how the ancients lived. And today we're also going to dive into the topic of money and its history and origin, and how and why that could be different for the benefit of all of us and the earth at this time. Michael has created something called the Ubuntu system, I guess you could say, or maybe there's a better way to say that. But Ubuntu basically has a special meaning. The word itself has a special meaning from his home in South Africa. And it points to a new way of living for humanity where we resource one another in conjunction with the earth and in harmony with all that is, rather than this wonky economic system that we have right now. So Michael, let's dive right in. Welcome. So grateful that you're here today.
Thank you, Shirai. Nice to see you. Nice to be talking to you.
Absolutely. Once again, grateful to be reunited here. And so tell us a little bit about the time of prophecy that we're living in as it relates to the ancient history of humanity and how that ties back into the money situation that we have here. It's a bit of a broad question, I suppose, but that maybe will help us prime the pump and dive in here.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to look at how many people are getting a sense that we somehow are living in a time of prophecy. And it has a lot of codes and a lot of symbols around us and a lot of indicators that we may actually be experiencing that. If you start looking at the biblical prophecy and other ancient civilizations that spoke about the end times and the end of days and what's going to happen. And if you just look around us, what's going on around the world, it certainly feels like we've entered a very dark and unstable, turbulent phase of human history. Everything seems completely out of control. There is nothing loving and beautiful and harmonious about what's erupting around us. And yet the majority of the world is yearning and striving for exactly that: unity, harmony, leading beautiful lives, living in communities of love and support for each other. And yet the opposite is happening. It's incredible when you look at the number of good people in the world, and just if you just look at the numbers, 8.5 billion people in the world, and almost 8.5 billion people wake up every morning and they want to do something good. Most people wake up every morning and they want to achieve something, they want to do something, they want to create something, whether it's creating a business, or whether it's building a house, or doing a sculpture or a painting, or creating education for your children or for yourself, or planting seeds, or growing food. People generally wake up and they want to do something with their lives. And yet the majority of the people throughout their lives never ever achieve what it is they want to achieve or dream of achieving, because the socioeconomic system we find ourselves in is 100% juxtaposed to the dreams and the ambitions of the majority of the people. Mm-hmm. So something is really wrong with the system, that very few of us actually ever get to fulfill our dreams and achieve our dreams and goals for ourselves, our families, and our communities. So since that is the case, we've got to reach the conclusion that something is wrong with the system we find ourselves in. And for many years, I've been asking the question at my lectures around the world, and sometimes to very large audiences. Like I think the largest was about 3,000 people in Germany. And I asked the people, how many of us are happy with the way the world is going? How many of us are happy with the way that our governments are doing things for us? And I must tell you that not once has anyone ever put up their hand to say that they are happy with the way the world is going. So I have 100% confirmation from the people that I've certainly interacted with around the world, and that's more than 20 countries or 30 countries around the world over a 10-year period. everyone I have interacted with is unhappy with the way the world is going. So I think that is a very good indicator of what's going on in the world. I'm not saying that everyone feels like that, but certainly the majority. So we can reach a very simple conclusion that something is dramatically wrong with our society, and most people want to get out of this. Most people want to get out of the system. They feel, like you said, that there's something dark and evil and uncontrollable and out of control around us. And most people have no idea how to get out of this mess, how to get out of this slavery system, this socioeconomic slavery system that we find ourselves in, where people have to work, 2 jobs, 3 jobs just to survive, just to buy bread and milk and put food on the table for their families. And they have to start week in, week out, month after month, year after year. This drudgery, this slavery, this misery, and something has to be done. But most people just cannot imagine how we could possibly get out of this system that we find ourselves in. Mm-hmm. Well, the good news is that there is a way out, and we'll be covering that. And there's a very simple way out of this. But maybe what has happened here is that society has had to devolve and had to fall apart and reach such low levels of consciousness and unity and support for each other and exploitation by the draconian leaders and the draconian totalitarian governments, as we're experiencing now in lockdown. It becomes very obvious to see that most of the governments of the people around the world are not there to help the people. They are there to promote some other agenda by some other organizations that control the governments. So maybe we've had to reach this point. Maybe this lockdown has been part of this great push to push humanity right to the edge of our sanity, for people to wake up, open their eyes, and realize that if we don't do something now, it's the end game. And maybe this is part of this prophecy that we've been pushed into, that we're now living in the end of days, the end times, and we have to stand up and resist the beast, resist the demonic activities that are going on around us everywhere, the pedophilia, the child trafficking, the exploitation, the sacrificial, the horrific sacrifices that are happening behind the scenes that many people are aware of. It is just despicable what's happening when you start opening your eyes, researching what's going on, and seeing how the global elite have stolen the world from its people and are exploiting the people, lying to the people through the fake news networks, through their governments, through all the agencies that they've set up over hundreds of years, reached the point now where they've pretty much got the world locked down. In 6 weeks, they locked the entire world down and convinced most of us that there is a dangerous pandemic that might just kill you. Well, many people are now realizing that was most likely, and the evidence is everywhere, that there's nothing to do with the pandemic, but everything to do with a totalitarian move against humanity. So here we are. What are we going to do about that? The good news is that there's a very simple way out of the system. And as we start coming back out of this lockdown, abuse of our human liberties, all our civil rights, our human liberties, our humanitarian and our human rights, as we come out of this insanity, people realize that they don't want to go back to the way things were. They want to live a normal life, but they want to live a life under different conditions, under conditions where they have more freedom, more sovereignty, where they feel that they cannot be exploited and abused the way that we have been exploited and abused in the past. And that's pretty much what we find from the ancient civilizations. The more you research the ancient civilizations, the more you find the keys and the clues of what not to do, and giving us the wonderful guidelines as to what we should be doing into the future and what not to do. And that's where the Ubuntu movement and the philosophy of one small town can change the world meets with the knowledge and information that we find by studying origins of humankind and ancient civilizations going back thousands of years.
Yeah, amazing. What are some of the codes that the ancients used to resource themselves that were more loving? The topic of today is the leadership of love, which is interesting because a lot of the things that you're speaking about are the antithesis of what we would call loving kindness or leading from what love would do. And yet we want to guide ourselves back or look maybe to the past a little to see where did money come from? How did the ancients, before money came along, what were the ancients doing to resource themselves, and how was it more loving than it is today?
You know, there is some interesting stuff to do with archaeology, and archaeology is being used by totalitarian leaders and draconian leaders throughout history. To use archaeology and ancient knowledge for their own benefit, to guide their own political narrative. And this is why most of the history books that we read today are absolute fairy tales. It's very far removed from what really happened in the past. And that's what you find when you start researching ancient human history, origins of humankind, the ancient ruins around the world. It's very obvious that stuff was going on that we have no clue, no idea how the ancients built these incredible structures that we find more and more of these ancient civilizations that once covered the world. Every month, every year, we find and discover more vanished civilizations, and we realize how little we really know about the history of this planet. So for anyone to speak with any kind of authority or believe that they know what was going on is really quite arrogant. So I like to talk about the ancient history from pretty much just the perspective of what we find, the physical evidence in the stone ruins, the tools, the artifacts, what's lying around, and piece together a story rather than reading history books and trying to piece together a story from the history books, because we all know that the history is written by the victors, those that win the wars. And they rewrite the history. Look what's happening in the United States right now. They're pulling down statues. They're trying to rewrite the history of the USA. It's ridiculous. And, you know, they try to infiltrate the USA to try and create an example and then spread that to the rest of the world. And before you know, if they succeed, the whole history of our civilization and of this current epoch will be rewritten and will be erased and written by whoever takes control and takes it over. And that's what they've done. This is what's happened for thousands of years. And it's fascinating to start comparing what's written in the ancient texts, the oldest texts that we can find, and most of these would be, when I refer to this, I refer to the Sumerian clay tablets, the Sumerian text, which remains the largest body of ancient knowledge, of ancient writings. By far, the Sumerian clay tablets, there are millions of them that are filled with ancient knowledge and so the Sumerian texts are really the largest body of ancient knowledge and information. Millions of clay tablets have been translated, and they share so much information about time that can be traced back to about 6,000 years ago, but even further back in time, you know, from the Sumerian kings list, they talk about a time before time, that the Sumerians themselves got information and knowledge from about a very ancient time in human history. It goes back hundreds of thousands of years. We learn about the gods, these beings that came to earth and what they did and how they cloned a new species and how they were mining gold. So this whole new spotlight is shone on what we never knew about, who we are, where we come from, and why we're here, and why it is that we're so enslaved and abused today, and why we're not aware of it, and why so many of us live in cognitive dissonance about the real history of this planet, while we keep believing the lies and the fake news that's shoved down our throats, because it seems to be the story of humankind. The story of humankind that literally goes back thousands of years. And the fact, and a very strong possibility and a likelihood that we were actually created and cloned to be slaves for these other beings in the gold mines. Now, that control of the species that was created was never relinquished. It was never, humans were never really freed from that absolute totalitarian enslavement and control and being lied to, so that we don't realize who we are, where we come from, and why we're here. And this is why when you start scratching and going down that rabbit hole, the truth becomes so unbelievable that it looks like many of the fairy tale and horror stories and science fiction movies that we've seen, and the mythological stories and movies that we've seen coming from Hollywood and all the great authors and writers throughout history, because much of that ancient information is actually encoded in the movies and the books that we've encountered over the last several hundred years. It's a truly what I call the terrible truth. And for us to be able to move forward, we first have to be able to come to terms and face to face with the terrible truth of human origins, the truth about the past, what really happened here, and be okay with it. Come to terms with it and say, okay, now that we know or have an idea, we will never know exactly what happened. And under the current conditions, something else was going to have to happen to be able for us to know exactly what happened. And we don't have those conditions right now. But we certainly right to be able to deduce that the history that we've been told is very different from what really happened. And we have to face this terrible truth. And from that has come, through the Ubuntu movement and what we learn from the ancient Sumerian texts about the origins of humankind, these other beings that were around here, the mythological creatures, the origins of money, the introduction of the first royal bloodlines and the first priest kings that mysteriously suddenly appeared on earth overnight. And we start realizing the game that's been played and the enslavement and the dumbing down of the species called Homo sapien, so that we were smart enough to be slaves and obey rules and follow orders and do repetitive work and fear punishment, have enough knowledge and experience of pain so that we fear consequence and punishment. And we know that if we don't do certain tasks that we've been told to do, that pain and punishment will descend upon us. And that's really what we need to deal with. And it's from that dark, what I call the terrible truth of our human origins, that comes the most liberating news of how we can extricate ourselves from that and create a beautiful world of abundance, prosperity, and absolute freedom, absolute liberty for all of humankind.
Does that mean that there's some kind of a stopgap where, even though we've had this history, we're reclaiming our power, as it were? Like, the way that I have understood it over the years is that each being created by whomever or tinkered with by whomever still has the spark of the prime creator within their heart. And at a certain point, even if they've been oppressed or even manipulated by certain beings who think of themselves as the creator being, so there's the creator being and then there's the source from which we all came, right? That source within us gives us the absolute right to aspire beyond the containment of whatever these creator beings did before.
Well, it's not just that. It seems, I think you hit the nail right on the head. What we need to come to terms with is that we're one with the Creator through our DNA that is imbued and encoded with all the knowledge of creation. Comes the resonance and the frequency that connects us, first of all to each other, so that once we start to resonate at certain frequencies, we start to connect to each other and people realize that, wow, we are actually one. We can start communicating telepathically. We can start anticipating things. We can walk into a room and feel a bad vibe or a good vibe, because it's all to do with resonance and frequency, and the resonance of coherent creation, the creative resonance of coherence and harmony. And when the moment you have dissonance, you create destruction, dissonance, and dis-ease. So it's only through the frequencies of resonance and coherence that we get into the frequencies of creation and start to realize that we are one with the Creator, we are one with God. The fact that there were some malicious and malevolent beings that utilized this knowledge of molecular biology and genetics and created and cloned a new species and then dumbed them down so they didn't know who they were, and that they had this absolute infinite power of creation. That is what I would call the great sin against all of creation. And you know, there's a lot more that one can talk about that, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole for this discussion. But in many of my lectures, I go into a deep, much more detail about the Anunnaki, the whole cloning process and what they did, and how Enki took all this knowledge and information, he actually encoded it into our DNA. And that is why so many people are on so many different levels of awakening and levels of consciousness. And so many people are yearning for more knowledge, more information, and yearning for the truth, because deep inside, at the center of who we are, we all yearn for truth. We all want to know what is the truth. So ultimately, this is why we get so disappointed and so sad and so angry when people lie to us, when we either lie to by our friends or family or partners or governments or bankers or anyone else that deceives us, because it takes us away from the core unifying frequency of unity resonance that really connects all of us, binds all of us together, so that we can start moving forward in a unified consciousness and turn this world into the absolute paradise that it should be.
And that's exactly what we are meant to do, and that's related to what we call the ascension. And that's what, you know, healing and energy healing and all the things that I've been focused on in this life are touching directly into this. Like when we do energy clearing, we're clearing patterns from way back then, and they're deep and old, and you're just reminding me of just how deep and just how old they are. So if there's any energy healers out there or people who have been trying to clear themselves, you know that you're doing a good job, and just keep going, because this is a big bucket of stuff to clear here, is what Michael's pointing to. And so how does this relate to money and our financial system? Like what is the history of money itself in this system, and how do we turn it around into a system that actually works for us and the earth?
The big question is, what is money? You know, most of us have no idea what money is, where it comes from, why we use it. It's just, we just accept it. In fact, money is far more of a unassailable holy cow than even the religions. You know, you can attack the Jews, you can attack the Christians and the Muslims and the Hindus and the Buddhists and all the religions. You can attack them for their beliefs and have a go at them. And, you know, based on the amount of work and research you've done, you might have some interesting angles and, yeah, but what about this and what about that, you know? But if the moment you attack money and say that, oh, money is, you know, we don't need money, money is just a tool of enslavement, people go crazy. So money is, you can't even go there, because majority of the people just assume and believe that money makes the world go round. Without money, there'd be no progress. Without money, we wouldn't achieve anything. How would we live without money? How would things work? How would we pay each other? How would we do things? How would the world keep moving forward if money didn't exist? And that is the big awakening that I had in 2004 when I discovered the true origins of money. When that penny dropped for me, and I realized that there was a time in human history that money did not exist. And I'm not even talking about bartering and trading. Any kinds of forms of exchange or bartering or trading did not exist. None of that existed. And yet people survived. They lived happily. They lived peacefully and happily in communities for thousands of years without money. And possibly there must have been periods of time that there was a lot more peace than there is today, because today there's no peace. We're in a perpetual state of war all the time. There's always conflict and war all over the world all the time. So the world is in a perpetual state of war right now. We just don't realize it. So there was a time in history that money didn't exist and people lived in small communities, and they seem to have had abundance of food and possibly lived far happier lives than what we live today, unless you've extricated yourself and you live in a little village somewhere in the middle of the jungle somewhere, and you're completely out of touch with the rest of the world, which, by the way, there are such tribes in the world today that still live in the deep jungles, and they probably live reasonably beautiful lives. That's obviously a very interesting subject to talk about when you start bringing technology and comforts and all those kind of things into it. But the key thing comes to us that most of us just accept money for what it is, and the fact that we need it, and without it, we believe that the world could not exist. Because that's what we're born into. We're born into a system. We're born into a socioeconomic system. From the first breath we take to the last breath we breathe out, our lives are 100% controlled by money. 100%. There's still some people that don't get that when I mention this. Everything, every aspect of our lives is controlled by money. Even the birth certificate that you get given when you're born, that's to do with a pen and ink and paper that's written on. All that stuff costs money to make. The hospital that you come from, that you're born in, even if you're born in a little village somewhere, there's still stuff around you that took money to make and build. Everything around your birth and throughout your life to the day you die, when the government has to issue a death certificate. So you go from a birth certificate to a death certificate, you become the possession and the property of something, which is your government. And we don't realize that we're just the possession of the countries that we are born into. We're the chattel of these countries. So we just completely and utterly believe that we need money to survive because that's what makes the world go round. Well, what if we just removed money from the system? What if tomorrow morning you woke up and there was no money? Just put yourself into that state of mind. That's what I did in 2004 to try and figure out how a world without money would work. And let me tell you, it was by far the most exciting journey of discovery that I could imagine for myself and that I could wish upon anyone else. So anyone watching this, do this for yourself. Imagine that you've just woken up. You might be in the same house that you're in, and in the town or wherever you are, and money doesn't exist, but life has to go on. How will we do things without money to carry on living in this world of ours? Go through the various processes. It is the most liberating and inspiring and uplifting exercise that you will ever do, because it'll take you a little while to try and figure it out. And then once you've figured out the first little step, you'll get so excited that it'll lead very quickly to you figuring out the next step. Oh, yeah, because if we can do this, then we can do that. Oh, my God. And then if we can do these, then we can do that. And then suddenly you realize that you're actually creating a doubling effect. Once you figure out the one thing, then it's much easier and quicker to figure out the next thing. And then suddenly those 2 things will become 4 things that you've figured out. And then those 4 things will become 8 things, then 16 things, then 32, and it just doubles. And you start solving all the problems of the world on your own without any money. And that's very much what happened to me. It was that exciting and that uplifting and inspiring.
Well, I can imagine a world without money. I mean, I really can. And, since 2005, I've been doing these workshops called Anchor the Dream, and the big vision that comes through for humanity is the gift economy, which is kind of what you're pointing to here, because it's not even bartering or trading. It's beyond that. It's everyone shows up and does their gifts for the community, and everything works because everyone wants the positive end game, and the inspired action flows through us once we have a collective vision. So it's actually enlivening to do what we call work or create things and make things together. Would you agree?
Yes, but unfortunately, that is yes, that is. But we need to add something to that. We need to add to that a cohesive, collaborative effort of how a community and a village or a community or a town will utilize this gift philosophy to create abundance for themselves, for everyone, so that we have an abundance of everything and not just a random scattered, you know, shoot from the hip kind of crazy bunch of people living together, do what they want and thinking they can just gift that to the community, because that's not going to work. And you got a bit of a, you got great intentions, but you got a lot of chaos and not enough for everyone. So, you know, you might have a few loaves of bread, but that's not going to help everybody. So you need to take that philosophy of a gift community and work it into a bigger model that will create absolute abundance. And I'm talking so much abundance that we actually have too much of everything. When I say too much of everything, I mean that. Too much bread, too much water, too much healthcare, too much food, too many hospitals, too many schools, too much of everything. Because when you start doing this collaborative effort that I've been sharing for so many years now, 15 years, through the Ubuntu movement and the One Small Town strategy, when you realize, when you start putting this collaborative effort together, how much we create together and how little time you have to contribute to your community in the towards the collaborative effort, how little time we each have to contribute to have this abundance, and at the same time have so much, all this other time for yourself to use your own natural talents and skills for your own satisfaction of creation or whatever it is you want to create or do or master. And that becomes the beautiful story of the Ubuntu movement and the One Small Town strategy. But we need to go back to the ancient times and talk about the origins of money, because we sort of got off the track a little bit. Most people don't have any idea what money is, where it comes from, how it was created, when it was created, and why do we even use it. And once again, this information comes to us not from the history books, and especially not from the academic books of universities and colleges and schools, from the books that are related to banking, financing, commerce, and so forth. All of those books start from the wrong premise, the false fake news premise or fake education information that money is a foundation for our society. So unfortunately, all the schools and university books that talk about money and economics and banking and so forth are fundamentally flawed, because they come from the wrong foundational perspective. Money was introduced to humanity as a complete and finite, absolutely complete and evolved philosophy. It was a completely evolved philosophy that was simply introduced to humanity, and some 6,000 years ago, that's what it seems around. It's very difficult to put an exact date on it, but I always say around 6,000 years ago, based on what we read in the Sumerian texts. Money did not evolve out of thousands of years of bartering and trading. That is one of the big lies that we've been told. And that is a very important agenda. There's a very clear agenda that is used by the banking empire, the banking families, the royal political banking bloodlines that run the world today, the Rothschild banking empire. And they've been using this lie that money is part of human evolution. They needed to make people believe that money has evolved with people over thousands of years, that we've always had it, we've always used money, we've always used some sort of bartering and trading or an exchange thing that then led to the creation of money, because you wouldn't always have chickens to exchange for rabbits or ducks to exchange for cows or whatever it was you needed to exchange. So money then became the new tool of exchange so that it could help us prosper and help us achieve greatness. And they have done such a good job that they've pretty much convinced majority of the world population today that money is that tool that allows us to prosper and create, and without money there'd be no innovation, there'd be no creation, we wouldn't be able to do anything. That's what most people still believe today. So
really
money,
interesting though, because I mean, that's even an eye opener for me. I guess I never heard you say it quite in that way before. So, that is a complete game changer, to think that we didn't start out with a bartering system.
No, not at all.
That's
That is
because
part of the lie.
people who are trying to do new economy and new systems, that's the first kind of go-to as well. Let's go back to bartering and trading.
No, so that is never, I must make it very clear. Bartering and trading and any form of exchange is not part of the Ubuntu one small town strategy. We have to go through a process of getting to a complete no money society. We can't go from zero to hero in one jump. That's not possisible. That's just simply never going to happen. So what we have to do is we have to use the tools of enslavement as the tools of liberation. This is really critical for people to embrace. So this has become the Ubuntu one small town mantra or slogan for the last 5 years now, since 2015. We use the tools of enslavement as tools of liberation, and use everything that's being thrown at us by the royal political banking elite that run the world. We can't fight them, we can't beat them, we can't resist them, we can't oppose them. Anything that you try and do in those areas to resist, to oppose, just leads to violence and bloodshed. We can't do that. We can't keep going back to that kind of behavior, because that's got us nowhere over thousands of years. And look what it's doing around the world today. Look what the resistance and violence and protest, look what that's doing in the United States right now. It just causes death, division. It separates people, it divides people. That's the last thing we want to do. We want to bring people together. We want people to pull together into a united, recognizing where we want to go. We want to go over there. We want to go to utopia. And to go to utopia, there's only one road, and we need to use that road together. Otherwise, we're going to destroy utopia if we keep falling for the trap and the divisive tactics played by the global elite. And they are masters of division, masters of propaganda and deception, and they're playing those cards very, very successfully right now. And so this is why I think that we live in these very exciting and disturbing at the same time prophetic days, that from which will come the global unification of people as they wake up, as they become enlightened and informed, and they realize that everything we've been told is a lie, that we've been manipulated through fake news media, propaganda on every possible level, and the good people are shown to are painted as the devil, and the devil is painted as the good, those that are trying to save us. And there's just so much confusion around the world. So what I like to say to people is that, watch that play out. Don't get too involved in it, because if you do get too involved in that game being played, you then have to choose a side, because you either got sucked into this side or sucked into that side. And the moment you do that, then you become in opposition to those guys. And that's the last thing we want to do. We want to unite the people and say, what do you want to do? Everyone is unhappy with the way the world is going. And that's why this is opposition and fighting, right? So everyone is in agreement that we don't like what's going on. So let's agree on what it is that we want. And we want a beautiful world. We want a utopian society, and utopian is a good word. Let's use that word. Beautiful utopian society filled with harmony, abundance, prosperity, love, unity on all levels, where violence and conflict is not even, it can't even enter our psyche, because it's completely unnecessary, and it is so far removed from our reality, because we have just created the utopian world where everything is possible, doable, creatable, inventable, manufacturable. Everything we've always imagined is possible, and we are doing that. We can do it. And with the Ubuntu One Small Town strategy, that's exactly where this will take us, without any violence, opposition, or conflict, because we use the tools of enslavement as tools of liberation. It is so simple, so elegant, so beautiful, that it boggles the mind with people that when they first come across this, until they get into it and they go, oh my God, I see what you mean. I see what you mean. Okay, how do we do this? We need to do it now. And I always say, no, just calm down. Just calm down, okay? Don't run out there and spoil it for everybody, because first come to terms with what you've discovered. Let it resonate with you. First, absorb it, let it resonate with you, mature with those ideas. Don't just run out and start telling everybody, because then you start sounding like a new reborn Christian and you just push everybody away. And we don't want to do that. We want to embrace people, we want to bring people into this philosophy. We need to go back to the origins of money again. Just
okay,
is there something you wanted to add there?
Yeah, so I just wanted to shift the conversation over to that solution energy.
Okay, so let's talk about the true origins of money. Where did money actually come from? And once again, the Sumerian tablets, the Sumerian clay cuneiform tablets, tell us about a time when the first priest kings suddenly appeared on earth. And these priest kings, the clay tablets tell us that this was a time when kingdom was lowered to earth from heaven. So the gods appointed the first priest kings on earth, and they put them in place to rule over humanity. And these priest kings, first of all, they lived a lot longer than humans, so they obviously were some other beings or some other creatures. Who knows who they really were? But these first priest kings, first thing they did is they built these huge temples that they lived in. Suddenly they owned all the land. The people became their slaves. And they had fierce weapons of mass destruction with which they could smite and control the people if they didn't listen to them. And this is why they became the kings, because the people feared them. And they obeyed them because they feared them. And clearly, if the people didn't do what they were told, they would be smited. And they'd be tortured. And they'd do terrible things to the people. And this is why they became the kings. So this is where we, according to the Sumerian texts, see the first appearance in human history of the royal bloodlines, and that became the royal political bloodlines today that run the world, the global elite, whatever you want to call them. And then obviously the Rothschild banking empire, which is interwoven with this royal political bloodline that runs the world today. So one of the first things that these first priest kings did is, like I said, they had these temples, they built these huge temples, and in these temples, they started to print these clay tablets that became the first bills of exchange, the first promissory notes printed in clay. And they became the first forms of money that they would exchange for people when they brought their gold and their silver in. So they would ask the people to bring their gold and bring their silver, and in return, they would give them clay tablets. So the very first appearance of these priest kings made them the first bankers. The temples became the first banks. And they started to issue the first forms of money in the forms of these clay bills of exchange and promissory notes. And the fascinating and the incredible thing about this is that the modern banking system works exactly the same way that it did in those very first times that these clay tablets were issued to the people. Bills of exchange, promissory notes, checks, all falling under the negotiable instruments title. And that is just spectacular. So nothing has changed. All that's happened is that the laws that govern the banking and the finance industry have just become more and more complex to make it more and more difficult for people to wangle their way out or not use the money or escape it or undermine it or abuse it. So all that's happened as people became wiser and smarter and more educated and literate, they had to create more laws and more rules and more restrictions to retain the control of this banking, creating money out of thin air, right? So that they keep control of this. And that's pretty much what it is. Bankers took the right, these original priest kings took the right to create money because they had the weapons of mass destruction. And that's how they've controlled the world for thousands and thousands of years and continue to do that today. Money did not evolve out of thousands of years of bartering and trading, as most, if not all, of our history books will tell us. Now, how do we get ourselves out of this?
Yeah, how do we get, what is the overview of the Ubuntu system that will help us make our way out of there and into this beautiful new way of living that you're speaking of?
Right. I would like to recommend for people to go and see our website. Go to ubuntuplanet.org or onesmalltown.org. Read the website. watch all the videos that are there. It's not a lot. It's really very simple. Some very short videos that are from 5 minutes to 20 minutes long. That'll give you a very quick introduction to how simple the One Small Town strategy is. Most important thing is that you have to remember that ultimately, the ultimate goal of the One Small Town strategy is that money will eventually disappear from our lives, from the system, and money will disappear. But it's going to happen organically. It's not going to happen overnight. We're not going to cut it off and switch it off, because that's just an insane idea. We are not, for example, we are not creating communities without money. And a lot of people jump to the wrong conclusion. They say, oh, great, we're going to create communities and we're not going to use money. Wrong conclusion. You're going to just destroy yourselves. You can't do that. You can't create a little fish tank inside an ocean of sharks and think that you're going to survive in that little fish tank with your, it's not going to work. So we have to create something that can continue operating in the big world around us, and yet have a community that is a new system that starts to use the tools of enslavement as tools of liberation so cleverly that it works for the entire community, every single person in that community, and slowly but surely makes that community so powerful, so wealthy, so untouchable, so incredible in every aspect, from science, technology, to healthcare, to food production, to everything you can imagine. That's what we're doing. So this is why we're doing this in small towns, and it's called One Small Town Will Change the World, and not one city will change the world. Because it's a lot easier to reach 10,000 people in a small town and say, look, we're going to do these different things. We're going to create businesses. We're going to set up farming. We're going to set up industry. We're going to set up all these different things that the community needs, but we're going to do it together and collaboratively, so that we don't create competition within our community. So we create cooperation and collaboration on every level.
Wow, that's definitely a different slant on things. Yeah. I mean, that's brilliant. And so there's no infighting within it. The community is working together to create all of its needs, and then we'll have a surplus that could be sold in the outer world, is what I understand. And then
exactly, that's it.
And so, is there
what it does is it creates a really big attraction, a very lucrative attraction for conscious billionaires and conscious investors that say, whoa, hold on. If I invest my money into this town, and I spent, $1 million setting up a bakery or a dairy or growing food or technology or whatever. If I set up $1 million or $10 million, whatever it is. So what are the benefits? Well, the benefits are, first of all, you're going to get free electricity because we have our own technology. It's important to talk about that. You're going to get free electricity. You're going to get a free labor force from all the people in the community that contribute their 3 hours a week. This whole collaborative effort is based on the fact that we want everyone to contribute 3 hours a week. It is voluntary. It's not compulsory. Okay? But only those who participate get the benefits of the things that we create. It's very simple. If you don't participate, you can still live in the town, but then you can't expect the benefits of the things that the other people are contributing towards. So very quickly, everybody in the community is going to start contributing 3 hours a week, because it's fun. It also becomes a fun leisure time where you meet other people. You do things that you normally wouldn't do. You learn new skills and so forth. So it actually becomes a far more fun thing than people imagine. It's not a laborious slave job that you do. Slave job, what you do is what you do every day of your life from 7 to 5 or 6 p.m. every morning, right? That's what the slave job is. 3 hours a week of contributing something to your community actually becomes a fun-filled pastime that you'll learn new skills and interact with other members of your community. But what it does, it provides the foundation of the labor force that benefits the investors that come into town.
So that must mean that you have, it'll be organized in such a way, and there'll probably be people who have full-time job helping to coordinate, organize, supervise, manage, design systems.
You got it.
The workforce comes in freely of their own choice to bless the community with services that help move all that manufacturing
All of this,
forward and whatnot.
all of this is very simply laid out in the One Small Town videos. It could be confusing if, we don't have enough time to talk about it now. It can be a little confusing if I go through it too quickly, but in essence it is. We have a small town of 10,000 people. We ask everybody to contribute 3 hours a week towards the community projects. When I say community project, I mean it's a business. It is a business that we set up with an expert, a master baker or a master cheesemaker or a master welder or a master engineer or a master scientist or a master healer. So every business is set up meticulously with a business plan, more meticulously than any other business plan anywhere else, because we want it to succeed. And everybody in town is asked to contribute 3 hours a week. But those 3 hours a week also go towards cleaning the streets, looking after the aged, delivering stuff, running the errands, holding the security, the delivering, all the stuff that normally costs money. It's the labor that always costs money in the big corporations. They have a huge bill that they pay towards the labor. Now, we have a town of 10,000 people with free labor force. That puts us in line with a large multinational corporation of, let's say, 5,000 people. And the average turnover of a corporation that employs about 5,000 people, the average turnover is about $1 billion per annum. So we can start looking at our town becoming a united, cohesive business. Our town and our community is the business because we work together. And we can start imagining we can turn over $1 billion a year for our town. Think of it like that. That's how incredible and prosperous our town can be very, very quickly. And underlying all of this is the technology that we, through the Ubuntu movement, bring to this town. And that is our new technology, our new electricity technology. We have this new technology that we will not share with anybody else except the small towns that agree to participate and implement the One Small Town strategy. Because the generators that generate the electricity, new, call it free electricity, free energy if you want it, but it's basically technology that doesn't need any input or anything, so it runs on its own. It's ready to be delivered to the mayors and the communities of the small towns. It will never be released into the industry. It will never be sold to individuals for their own gluttony so they can exploit others. We will only give these generators to the community so that it belongs to the community, not to an individual or the mayor or the council. These generators will belong to the people of the community. Once they have these generators, they have free electricity. They have their own free supply of electricity. That becomes a foundation for everything they choose to do into the future. And from there, everything becomes very, very easy and simple to create, invent, manufacture, distribute, you name it.
That's beautiful. Wow, that's amazing. And we are coming to the close of the show now. And of course, we could speak for hours. Like you said, we could speak for weeks about this. And we should. I feel we should. And so people can get involved with the Ubuntu movement. They can start having conversations. They can start looking at towns that might be available for doing this in. And all that can be found at what is the website exactly again?
Well, it's either onesmalltown.org or ubuntuplanet.org. It's probably easier for people to go to onesmalltown.org, and all the information is there, the videos are there, the manifesto is there, the letter to the mayor is there. Just go there and explore. Have fun, absorb it, digest it, become one with it so it resonates with you, so you truly understand it. Don't just watch 5 minutes and then rush off and try and tell somebody about it, because you probably mess it up. Just first really.
That makes sense. Yeah, because it is, some of us do we act before we're even finished getting the idea through. But that is a very loving idea. And this is the day of the leadership of love. What would love do? Well, love would create a small town that could become a utopian, blissful, harmonic community with a little bit of thought and organization and proper management. It sounds totally doable to me, and I love it, and I just think it's wonderful. So thank you so much, Michael, for being on here today on the Harmonic Convergence 2020, and I hope everybody will go and check out your websites and please know that we love and appreciate you for all that you're holding and doing for the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your interest, and lots of blessings for all the people who watch this, and go out there, spread the message, be the seed of consciousness in your community. Don't sit on the fence. Speak your truth. Learn this information. Go out there and share it with everybody.